Star Wars The Last Jedi is finally in theaters, and this is going to be a spoiler-filled review of the film. If you've not yet seen the film, do not watch this review. Watch it later, add it to your watch list for later, days or hours. Who knows? Maybe you're watching the movie as we speak. If you are, great. If you have seen the movie though, hi, welcome, and let's talk about it. Before we continue, actually, I wanted to show you something. Just one second. Our theater gave us free lightsabers. It was pretty cool. We walked in there, and there were just like lightsabers on our seats. And I figured, what the heck's going on? And they were like, hey, you guys are so special to us as Star Wars fans. And, they didn't want to say the words, you're making us a lot of money by coming here. So we wanted to give you something fun. And they gave us a gift. As you all know, I loved The Last Jedi. I thought this was a really, really great Star Wars movie. One of my favorites already in the saga. After I've let it marinate a little more, ever since I did my spoiler-free review, there are certain thoughts I've had about it. And I figured now that I've woken up the next morning, I figured I'd actually give you a proper, concise spoiler thought, section of what I thought of the film. I mean, there's a lot to talk about over here, so where should I start? Let's just start with the beginning, because the film is, from the get-go, it is going places, because we now have the fact that the Resistance is pretty much on its last legs here. The film is really showing you that the First Order is really gaining the upper hand because their base is pretty much destroyed from the last movie. They're on their ships, they're on the way out, they have very limited amounts of fuel. Poe Dameron is trying to do everything he can to take down a dreadnought, which is this new kind of ship that the First Order has. That entire sequence of events was really great. It's also beautifully shot. This is one of the more interesting space battles because it really gives you the fact that Rian Johnson's really worked on making these space battles look even better than they ever have. This is a very good looking movie that way, and the action sequences for the most part, they are magnificent in this film. We'll talk more about that when it comes to the lightsaber stuff with Rey, Kylo Ren, and of course Luke. We'll talk more about that stuff. Luke in this movie. Now, you know how there's that 2-year build-up we've had, right? I mean, that's known. How do you think that moment's gonna go down? Because people have been waiting and waiting forever for that moment to happen. It goes down in my opinion, the most perfect way it can. Luke is handed the lightsaber. He takes it in his hand. He looks at the lightsaber, looks back at Rey. Rey smiles for a minute. Luke looks back at the lightsaber, looks back at her, and then he does the most amazing thing. He just flings it away, back, and it just goes flying off the edge of the island. I mean, that's perfect. I mean, that's the best way you can tell Star Wars fans in this movie without having to really give them more of the plot at this point in time of the film, because this is like 10 minutes in. The only major things we've seen so far is that Finn's woken up and we saw the dreadnought sequence. How do you tell Star Wars fans that you're going to subvert expectations in this movie? It's easy to do that by saying that, oh, we're going to take certain things which you think are going to happen and we're going to make those things not happen. You can tell that to Star Wars fans all you want, but really, it really comes down to simple things like, hey, here's something amazing. We're going to subvert expectations on how Luke is going to respond to Rey just handing over the lightsaber. I mean, I thought that was absolutely perfect and hilarious. This film has a few moments like that. We'll talk more about that. Of course, this leads us to the introduction of the Porgs. I didn't talk about the Porgs in my spoiler-free review, and I feel like I've committed a crime that way, because just look at those things, man. I mean, guys, the things are so cute. There's not like they're plot devices or anything. They're just creatures that are in the movie. And one of them has a fascination with being in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon and constantly going, scream, scream! That's my terrible Porg impression. But yeah, I mean, at the end of this film, if people didn't go out buying more Porg merchandise, I'm surprised. I mean, I intend on, personally, going later to buy a Porg plush toy. I want no judging remarks on this. I mean, why not? I like a Porg plush toy. Those things are adorable. I love the one which just looks at Chewie when it was, Chewie was trying to eat a Porg. Just looks at it like so sad, it's gonna cry. Oh my god. But Rey is trying to do everything she can to train with Luke, but Luke is very adamant about this. And this leads us to one of the themes of the film, and now I can finally talk to you about how Rian Johnson deals with this movie. It's something I tried to hint at in my original review, but I couldn't really because, like I said, it was a huge plot related thing and it would have essentially given away how this movie was being dealt with. Psychological warfare. He actually went with the idea of making the film more about how the characters think rather than actually making about what the characters do. Or for a long time in this movie, especially with the resistance, Poe is trying to say things like, okay, we gotta do something, we gotta attack, we have to do something, we have to just, launch our ships. We have to have some kind of a battle plan. But Vice Admiral Holdo and Leia, who is unconscious due to, we'll talk about that scene in a second, keep saying that no, we gotta wait, we gotta actually make sure people survive here, and you're thinking very rashly that you can't just keep blowing up people. And the first time you see that, you're like, oh man, I'm not a fan of you. I mean, come on, you gotta do something. But then as the film goes on, you're surprised by the fact that, yeah, actually it makes sense because in wars, the rash decisions are what cost lives. And then over here, really, if you think about how to help people more than you decide to be like, hey, let's just do the most violent thing that comes to our mind first. That's a ridiculous way to just deal with the situation. And it's about how these decisions actually affect the tide of how things are to happen. In fact, one of the biggest ways to explain psychological warfare in this movie probably has to be Kylo and Rey, because they have this connection suddenly, this force connection where they're talking to each other in completely different places and they can see each other and they can hear each other. And the connection in this film I thought was amazing because it really brings to light one thing which people have asked about ever since The Force Awakens, which is what kind of connection are they gonna have once we get to future movies? And this film addresses that beautifully, and I think that's actually a very remarkable way of addressing it. It's also a very unique way of addressing it. We've never really seen the Force explored that way. And I really like some of the things they were able to do, like some of the parallel conversations, the fact that whenever Rey would walk somewhere, Kylo would start walking in the same direction and he'd look in the opposite direction, which Rey is looking at like a mirror image. There's one edit like that. I thought that was spectacular editing. This film actually has spectacular editing as a whole. And it really added to the entire theme of the film that they're actually trying to run this by mind. There is lightsabers in the movie, don't get me wrong. Kylo Ren has his lightsaber, Rey has her lightsaber, and they are fighting, not themselves, but Praetorian guards and maybe Snoke. We'll talk more about that in a second. Trust me, this is going to be a long review. But that's not the crux of the film. The film decided to actually make action sequences not the focus of the film. It made the characters the focus of the film. So that is why at the end of the film, you feel like you know more about the characters. You learn more about them and you saw some authentic emotions from them and you saw the conflict in them about how they're shifting between light side and dark side and how that can affect so many decisions that are made as the film goes on, not just for themselves, but for other characters that may not even be in the same location at that point in time. I found that very, very interesting. I thought Snoke in this movie was pretty good. I actually think that in this one he was, well, brought down to a more, well, shall I say, literally human level because he's not as gigantic as Force Awakens may have made him out to be, and there's this mythical sense to him. So Snoke is like, you have failed me, because there's a conflict within you that is just so strong, and you keep thinking that there isn't, like you kill Han Solo, sure, but there is still a lot of conflict within you, like you are not ready to make some of the more hard decisions yet in your life. And so Kylo loses his cool, he smashes his helmet, and he's like, prepare my ship for takeoff. And they finally go, and Snoke's ship actually follows the resistance ships through light speed. And so this entire space battle resumes, and we have a moment over here where Kylo figures out that Leia's on the ship. And you have that moment which is hinted at in the trailers where he is essentially about to fire at the command center and he's about to take out Leia, but then he decides not to. However, at the time he does that, he doesn't take into account other TIE fighters that are in the air, and, well, they end up shooting, and the command center is blown up, and Admiral Akbar is killed, may rest in peace, as well as other characters, and presumably Leia. And I was like, wait, what? Are they gonna just kill Carrie Fisher here all of a sudden? But then you see the shot of the debris flying around, and you see Leia in the center slowly start to move her fingers again, and she pulls herself back onto the ship using the Force, which answers a big question people have had: is Leia ever going to use the Force in these movies? And that's about as spectacular a way to answer that question as it gets. I mean, that scene was beautiful. Some people are going to look at that scene and be like, that was so stupid. Like, come on. I'm like, no, it makes perfect sense. It answers a gigantic debate Star Wars fans have been having for many years now. And this is, I mean, an excellent way to do that. One of the most compelling things about this movie, though, and going back to this, is Luke's conflict. Because Luke is on this island for many reasons. One of them in particularly being that he thinks the Jedi Order is really done for, but also because he believes he's failed Kylo Ren, or Kylo Ren failed him. We have the flashback sequence where we see the Jedi Temple before with the other students. We don't see the other students, but we see how Ben Solo is starting to get corrupted, it seems, and Luke is taking notice of this, and so Luke tries to do something about it. But there are different versions to the same story which are told throughout the film until the finale of the film, where you really get some clarity on exactly what kind of story you should listen to, or maybe not. The film actually asks certain questions like that, and it makes the viewer also have a split way of looking at things, because the film is really about trying to show you the balance between light and dark, about how certain decisions can be made which actually have implications on both sides rather than just having implications on the one extreme side. Both sides. But I do like the idea that Luke decided to do something about it, and Kylo thought otherwise. He thought he was just trying to kill him for the sake of it, and so that led to this confrontation, and he brings down the building, the little hut on Luke, and destroys the entire Jedi Temple along with the other students, who I'm assuming become the Knights of Ren later. We haven't yet seen the Knights of Ren in these movies. I don't know where the hell they are. That's one of the things I've been asking since Force Awakens. Like, are we going to see more of the Knights of Ren? Wait, they're still not here? Where are the Knights of Ren? Like, are we ever going to see these guys in a movie? Or are they just going to show up at the very end of like episode 9 to be like, by the way, where are the Knights of Ren? We have a bit of a role in this thing. You never know. One of the things adding to the conflict in this movie, though, which I thought was really great, was Rey's, little pull to the dark side. You have a really great psychological sequence here where she looks into this mirror effect thing where she tries to see who her parents are, trying to do this effect, but it turns out she can't see her parents, and that's constantly pulling her towards a darker entity. I thought that was also really, really great, and as her connection with Kylo grows through the Force, it just gets stronger and stronger that way. I thought that was also really effective, and that was this part of the film, this entire theme of the film, this is what fascinates me so much, because this goes back to something that has been mentioned before in previous Star Wars movies, especially the original trilogy, the idea of the Force being all around us, and that it's more powerful when it comes to how things are within your mind, your mental state, rather than what's in your hand. In the prequels, they decided, no, the lightsaber is more powerful. That's what Count Dooku says. It appears that this contest cannot be decided by our knowledge of the Force, but with our use of the lightsaber. That always irked me, because I thought, wait, lightsabers are just there to be like, hey, it's a weapon. You can use it, but it's not supposed to be the one thing you fall back on immediately. The first thing you have to think of the Force. The Force is really the most powerful weapon that you have in your arsenal. And now it's not even a weapon. It's just a living thing that surrounds all living things. And it's this energy. Honestly, that's what this movie is showing you. And once again, this movie does a great job of showing you that. And it makes you look at the Force as an energy, something that can be used, something that can be within a person, and about how it can affect people, and how even the tiniest little glimmer of hope how it can affect the people's mindset and Rey's mindset, especially. The film constantly teased Luke being on the dark side or the light side. I mean, honestly, was that tease needed? No, he's on the light side the entire movie. But I really like the way you could have looked at it and been like, oh, maybe he's on the dark side because he actually created Kylo Ren to an extent. To an extent. But he also did know what Kylo Ren was capable of. So at the same time, you can't really blame him too much. Maybe you can. See the conflict? Conflict! Um, right. Now, while all of this is going on, we have the Finn and Rose storyline going on because Finn is essentially told that in order to stop Snoke's ship from constantly gaining on the Resistance ships because their ships are running so low on fuel, Finn has to find a way to get onto Snoke's ship and to find a way to override certain protocols that would enable their ship to basically go offline and their lightspeed trackers to shut down because they essentially now have lightspeed tracking and they can actually within 30 seconds find out where the rebel ships are headed. And then so in order to avoid all of that, Finn is essentially sent to a place called Canto Bight where they're supposed to find a code breaker who could do something amazing with this entire power that he has. However, he doesn't, well, yeah. And so they go to Canto Bight, and this leads me to that only flaw in the film because Canto Bight is essentially a Las Vegas casino. Essentially. It even has a horse race track, which looks like a horse race track, except there are other creatures racing around it. It looks like, a racetrack. So in that way, it looked a lot like the film was just Vegas for like 10 minutes. That was just kind of weird. I feel like that just really took me out of the movie because the sense of, oh, there are new worlds in Star Wars all around and you can explore all those new worlds. Like, I love doing that, but this was kind of the one thing which felt like, oh, but I feel like I've seen this a lot in other worlds before. The cameo by Justin Theroux is also like, oh, no, it's okay, we're doing fine. It's like, wait, but that's like Casino Royale. The scene literally became like Casino Royale for a second. That was just my major gripe with that entire film. It was just felt like we were just in this very familiar setting all of a sudden. Aside from that, I thought the rest of the movie was fine. The way Finn fights Phasma, though, was really great. I love the insult. Come on, Chrome Dome! Great. Phasma dies in the movie, by the way. That was pretty amazing. Although, I would have liked to see Phasma's face. You get a hint of it because you see that the that thing, the prod that Finn has in his hand, it slices part of her helmet off and you see Gwendolyn Christie's eye. I thought that was kind of cool. It's kind of like a nice callback as well to a scene in Star Wars Rebels, the one where Vader fights Ahsoka and you have that moment where Vader suddenly becomes Anakin again for a second when his helmet is slashed a bit and you see Anakin's eye, which is this, the yellow brown eye underneath it, but then Vader slowly consumes him back. I thought that scene was really great. It had a nice callback that way. Finn's like, I am scum, rebel scum. It's like, my man. That was pretty great. Finn's little sacrifice moment was also really, really, quite something. It was actually starting to feel something. I'm like, oh my god, is he actually gonna do it? Is he actually gonna do it? And then suddenly the ship comes in from the side on Crate and stops him, and you find out it was Rose because he's like, the point of this entire fight is like not to sacrifice each other all the time. It's about, saving what you love. And that was a very sweet moment as well. Some people I know were like, not a big fan of the chemistry between the two. I guess it really comes down to, how you thought of certain things. Personally, I thought they were fine. That wasn't one of the huge issues I had with the film because I thought they worked fine. I did mention that I really liked Kelly Marie Tran in my original review. So there's that. Going back to that connection between Kylo Ren and Rey, because this leads to Rey saying, hey, maybe I can get Kylo Ren to turn back to the light side, because that conflict is within him. I've seen that conflict multiple times when we touched hands. I saw your future as well. You killed Snoke. You did some amazing things. You turned. I have to make sure that you do this. And so she decides to make this decision that I'm going to go to Snoke's ship and I'm going to try and make him turn back to the light side. However, Luke warns her that this is a terrible idea, but she still goes nonetheless. And this leads to the big surprise moment of the film. Luke is constantly conflicted by all of this, right? And he goes over to the place, the tree where the Jedi books are. from the earlier scene. Great scene before that, which was, where are you from? I'm from nowhere. No, no one's from nowhere. Where are you from? Jakku? Okay, that's really pretty much nowhere. But this second scene with this entire setting leads us to Yoda appearing. Yoda's in this movie. We finally have Yoda again. Frank Oz is in it. We have this CGI puppet. That's an interesting choice. But Frank Oz as Yoda was just such a great moment. I thought that was absolutely beautiful. Brought a tear to my eye, man. That was fantastic. I was so happy to see that, and I love the conversation they have as well because he's like, I'm gonna burn this entire thing down. The Jedi have got to end," and then Yoda just summons lightning, and it blows up the entire tree. And Luke is like, "There were sacred Jedi texts in there," and Yoda's like, "Sacred Jedi texts, you said? Read them, did you? Not page turners, they are." Yeah, it's like, I love Yoda. I love Yoda. I'm so glad he's back. So Rey finally aboards Snoke's ship, decides to do whatever she can to get Snoke to think, "Hey, your apprentice, yeah, that dude's gonna turn. You are going to probably die from this thing." But Snoke is very convinced that that's not gonna happen. Now, one of my minor nitpicks with the film, the one I didn't mention in my spoiler-free review, which I figured is not really a deterrent to the movie in my opinion because of the way I looked at certain things after a while, was that Snoke is not there much in the movie. He's mostly on a chair. Seems familiar to another Dark Lord. So there's that. So Snoke is essentially toying with Rey, trying to find out where Skywalker is, and Kylo Ren, the conflict within this guy is just getting stronger and stronger. And Snoke finally says, "Okay, my apprentice, kill her." And he's just getting more and more taunting by the second. And then Kylo Ren, in one of the most unexpected moves ever, uses his hand to actually make the lightsaber next to Snoke, which is Rey's lightsaber, turn in his direction, and he slices Snoke in half, and he essentially just kills Snoke, which is quite an amazing moment because it makes a lot of things very questionable. It's like, oh wait, Snoke was essentially nothing this entire time, kind of like a fanatic at best. But that entire sequence of events leads to, in my opinion, the best lightsaber fight of the entire saga, which is where Rey and Kylo Ren are essentially side by side fighting the Praetorian Guards. That scene is amazing. And it actually looked like something out of like House of Flying Daggers or something. It was like Japanese samurai influences were all over this scene. And I thought it was beautifully done with some amazing moments where Rey had to basically kill a guard or Kylo killed a guard. I really like what they were able to do with some of those effects, but this is also the point where Rey has decided that, oh great, there's a turn happening in him. He'll turn to the right side because he just killed his leader. But then Kylo's like, no, you know what? We can do this together. We can rule the galaxy together. And Rey's like, please don't do this. Like, please don't do this. Like, come on. But this kind of starts off the whole cycle again because now Kylo Ren is supreme leader, and so he has control over a lot of stuff now. And so he finally decides that, oh, the resistance is starting to get away on these escape pods, which are being launched from that actual ship, which is almost out of fuel, and they're heading towards this planet called Crate. We have to stop them. And so the transport pods are being blown up one by one by one by one by one. And then Vice Admiral Holdo, Laura Dern, decides to do something in this moment where she decides to activate light speed and head straight towards the ships, the Snoke ships and the Imperial ships. And they realize exactly what's about to happen. And she does it nonetheless, and that is my favorite shot of the entire movie, when you finally see how the light speed just shatters past the ships and just like slices them. I thought that was such a gorgeous visual to look at, and the silence that accompanies it was also amazing. It is one of the most beautiful shots of the entire film, and actually no wait, it is the most beautiful shot of the entire film for me, and arguably, like I said, my favorite of the entire saga. That shot was stunning to look at. And that leads to the finale of the film being this amazing explosive event, because now comes the part of the movie where I feel like many people are going to be like, it's like Empire Strikes Back. It's like a copy. It's like Force Awakens was like episode 4. Episode 4 and Force Awakens actually have a lot of differences, but people like to really exaggerate the similarities thing. This has one scene, which is a poster right over here. This little scene right over here. So we have our walkers, the gorilla walkers over there, and we have the tiny AT&T walkers right over there. And we have TIE fighters coming in, and this is a salt planet, and there's all this red dust that's flying around every time something gets blown up, which is similar to why the poster is in a lot of shades of red, because it's essentially coming down to this particular moment of the film. This battle sequence, though, is extraordinary. The ship-to-ship stuff, the way the walkers are coming in, these things look amazing. And you're constantly under this thought that this is the end of it. This is how it's gonna, basically come to an end for the resistance. And then just when things are looking extremely terrible, the Millennium Falcon comes in and starts shooting, and we have Porg on the board. Yay! Porgs. I love Porgs. I love Porgs. And Kylo Ren is just losing his mind, like, destroy that ship no matter what! And it's, alright, this is gonna be fun. And we have that entire amazing sequence of events and this amazing action sequence. But really, it's come down to the fact that Luke is essentially a glimmer of hope that the Resistance needs. It needs to be something that people can look at and believe that hope can exist. And so, just like that, Luke suddenly appears out of nowhere. He goes to Leia. You have a heartbreaking moment where well, that was a hard one, especially the last line. It's like, you're never really gone. You never really go. And he just gives Leia a kiss on the forehead. I was like, oh my God, that's a hard one. And Luke steps out onto the battlefield with a lightsaber in hand, and Kylo targets every single walker towards Luke and fires, and you have this massive firing that happens towards Luke, but Luke is unscathed. And it's just an amazing moment, and everybody applauded in our theater. And Kylo, comes down towards Luke to face him, one-on-one. And again, you have a Japanese-style scene set up with some of the movements, like the foot movements and the way the sword is used. Lightsaber is used. So that was also pretty great. And of course, that leads to that fun moment where it's like, no, but Luke isn't here. He's actually still on Ahch-To, and he's actually using the Force to project himself in this particular place, because he actually looks a little different. I figured, maybe he looks a little different just cause. But apparently it's like, no, just because it's a projection. So it's a completely different Luke Skywalker. However, at this point in time, Rey is on the Millennium Falcon, and she's trying to get the Resistance out because, as Luke says that, you're wrong about your statement, he says to Kylo Ren. He's like, you're wrong about your statement regarding the Resistance will fall here, and that this is the end of the war, and that I'm going to be the last Jedi. The Resistance is not going to fall. This is, it's just begun. The war has just begun, and I am not the last Jedi. I will not be the last Jedi. And you have this moment where you see Rey has essentially used the Force to lift all the rocks out, and the characters come out from behind, and Finn and Rey have their reunion moment, and then Luke suddenly disappears with the line, "See you around, kiddo." And Kylo Ren is devastated about it. And this leads to the controversial moment of the film, which I think a lot of people are going to have an issue with. Luke is overpowered by the fact that he's used the Force to such an extent. He's absolutely exhausted. And he looks at the sun, and it has this binary effect, which is really beautiful, very similar to the first amazing shot we had of Luke in the original movie. And as they're feeling Luke's strength, Leia and Rey, Luke disappears, just like passing on, and he's now one with the Force. So yes, it is easy to say that, Luke dies, but yeah, Luke dies. And that's a very heartbreaking moment, and it's definitely one of those things that just, it happens, and you're like, whoa, I don't know how to process that. Because the film ends in a way where it's like, okay, now we don't have Snoke, we don't have Luke, and, Leia, may she rest in peace. We're not going to have Carrie Fisher in the next movie, so how do you proceed with that? It is open-ended. We're, of course, going to get an episode 9 that's going to put a capper to this entire saga, the Skywalker saga. I'm really looking forward to seeing what that's going to be like. I can't wait to see that. And this review is running a little long at this point. So, as it stands, how do I like The Last Jedi? Well, I've already told you in my original review that I loved the film, and I think now that I've thought about it a little more, I love it even more. I can't wait to see it a few more times in theaters within the next week because that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And I hope you guys really enjoyed the film as well. So guys, The Last Jedi, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know. As always, if you like this, please subscribe and may the force be with you.